We are going to be studying today the fourth day of creation, and as I mentioned in my invitation, the fourth day of creation has to do with the creation of the lights, the luminaries. And it's nice because it's the fourth night of Hanukkah, and the great mitzvah of Hanukkah is the luminaries. It's the lights of the Chanukiah, so it's nice that it came out like that. But beforehand, we first need to finish the third day. And the third day was the creation of land. And the creation of land was split into two. Why? And first we have, God says, and we studied this 2 weeks ago, the last time we studied, God says He took the oceans and He created the landmass, and that should have been the end of the day. But no, instead there's another cycle of creation that takes place on the third day of creation. That's what we're going to be reading now. And the question is, why do these two things happen on this one day of creation? There must be some relationship, there must be something here. So that's one of the things we're going to be looking at. But let me just begin by reading to you the pasuk. And by the way, just to illustrate that it's two separate creations. First is a creation of the land masses, and then there's a creation of the vegetation. To illustrate this and to show that it's not just, I'm not just trying to create this illusion of connection. After the land masses are created, the pasuk says, Vayad Elohim Kitov. God looked at the land masses and said Kitov, and always at the end of the creation he says Kitov, and then we go to the next day. And here, afterwards he says, he creates the vegetation, and then what does it say at the end of the vegetation? Vayad Elohim Kitov. So you see, usually the Kitovs, it's one Kitov per day. Except for the second day that doesn't have any kitovs. But the day Tuesday, the third day of creation, has two kitovs, right? So there must be some relationship between the creation of the land and the creation of plant life forms. Now let's start. So I'm going to read to you the pasuk. Vayomer Elohim, Tache haaretz, Dasha, oesev mazriya zera. God said, let the land vegetate. Desha means plant life forms. It's a general term. And there's two types of desha. Number one, oesev mazriya zera. First, it is going to be the herbs, the vegetables, the smaller type of like grass and weeds, right? Moss. That's oesev mazriya zera. Now this oesev, this herbal type of life forms, it's going to be a type of creation that itself creates a seed. Mazriya zera. So I'm going to create these herbal life forms, which are going to themselves produce seeds, and these seeds will in turn produce the herbal life forms. That's number one. And then peri, and the second type of plant life is a tree which has a fruit. And this fruit is going to have something very unique about the fruit. So it's a tree that produces a fruit, peri. And what's unique? Also peri, let me know, that the fruit itself will have the ability to produce other fruits. You understand? So this is a very unique point in the creation of the world, because what's going to happen here is there's going to be types of creation that can replicate itself and make itself over and over again. So let's go a little more deeply into the Pesukim. That's the Peshat. And I explained to you what the word Desha means. I said Desha is a type of vegetation, it's a type of plant life form, it's a general term, and then there's two different types. So let's, first of all, ask the following question. What is the relationship between the creation of the plant life and the creation of the earth? That's question number one. Question number two. What is the relationship between the oceans, which were created in the second day, right, the Ma'am Hashem Mitachat Larakia, and the plant life forms? And you see here that whoever wrote the Torah, which we know, of course, is God, is the creator of the universe. And because God, the creator of the universe, is also the author of the Torah, we see that it clearly he understands what we now are beginning to understand. Well, he understood it already from the day of creation, right? So there's a very logical sequence of events. First of all, the oceans. The oceans, as they were originally created, they were in a particular state, and then at some point, Earth begins to have these plant-like life forms, very primitive-like plants. And these primitive-like plants, they have a profound effect on the oceans. They change the oceans because the plants, they suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, right? And where does the carbon dioxide go when it's sucked out of the atmosphere? Ultimately, it ends up in the oceans. The name of the process is called silicate weathering. If I wanted to impress you, I would start talking about silicate weathering. But the purpose here is not to impress upon you that I'm a scientist or that I understand geological processes. Rather, I'm giving you the opportunity to Google silicate weathering, and you will see how plants absorb the carbon dioxide, and eventually that carbon dioxide ends up on the bottom of the oceans, and it transformed the ocean. So you see that after God creates the oceans in day 2, we need the plant life forms in day 3 to transform the oceans into the state that they are in today. That's number 1. Number 2, what is the relationship between the plants and the land? Okay, so now I'm going to read to you a quote from a scientific journal which addresses that very question. And here it is. Here's the quote. Nearly 500 million years ago, I don't know whether it was 500 million years ago. Honestly, I get a little skeptical when they throw out numbers like this, but it doesn't matter. I'm just reading the quote. Earth's lowland landscapes were dominated by vast, sandy, gritty plains, meaning the surface of the Earth was more like the surface of Mars. You ever see the pictures that came in from the surface of Mars? Very, very desert-like, right? Barren landscape. So originally, before the plants were created, the surface of the Earth, the landmass, was very much desolate, very sandy, wind blowing and sand all over the place. I'm continuing to read. They then underwent a major, irreversible change, after which these landscapes became dominated by thick layers of mud, meaning it became very rich, the soil changed, it was proper for the plants, literally made the earth more appropriate for life forms. So here you see what happens. God creates the oceans, God creates the land, but what do you need in order to complete the creation of the oceans? Plants. What do you need in order to complete the creation of the land? Plants, right? So you see the relationship here, how the ordering in the Pesukim is very precise. You have the oceans, you have the land masses, they're very sandy, they don't produce life, and then you have plants, and the plants transform the land. So you can't talk about the creation of land unless you talk about the creation of plants. Perfect at the scientific level. Now, let's go back to the beginning of the pasuk because I want to go into it a little more deeply. We said that there's 2 types of plants. There is what's called the Ayesev. Aki, if you don't mind, shut that maybe. Right. There's the Esev that we said, finding the pasuk. Ayesev Mazriya Zera, we said that there's the vegetable type of life forms, primitive forms of vegetation, grass, right, that they produce a seed. And we said there's Eisperi, we said there's a tree that produces a fruit, and that fruit has a power to produce another fruit. Esperi or seperi, right? Okay, so let me explain to you something here. If you look at the pasuk, right, it says something interesting. There is something new happening here. Until now, we had, let's call it, inorganic matter. Inorganic matter doesn't have the ability to replicate itself. What is unique about what's happening here is that for the first time, God is creating this creation that can self-replicate. It's like he's creating a creature that has a Xerox machine, and the Xerox machine keeps creating within the creature over and over and over again. And what's interesting is, if you look at the pasuk, it says, Asher zar'obo. The pasuk emphasizes the fact that this creature has within it a seed, right? And it says it again. Asher zar'obo lemineu. It repeats it. There's almost an excitement. The author of the Torah is excited about this. So what's the excitement about? And because it really is marvelous. We take it, of course, for granted, but the Torah is excited about the fact that there is now this really amazing creation that can self-replicate. And the power of self-replication is something that even the malachim cannot do. The malachim do not have the power, they do not have the ability to self-replicate, but these plant life forms have that power. And it's all in one of the most incredible things in the world, and this is where it was created. I think one of the most incredible things in creation is not the galaxies, it's not the pulsars, it's not the supernova. I think one of the most incredible things in the world, and you see the enthusiasm and the marvel of the Pesukim, is the DNA molecule. The DNA molecule, the secret of life's ability to self-replicate, right? And it's a crazy thing. Every human being has cells, right? How many cells do we have? Who knows about? I don't expect you to count them, but more or less, how many cells do we have? Any biology students here? Okay, every human being has about 6 trillion cells. Every single, and this is every life form, by the way, meaning not every life form has 6 trillion cells. Every life form, whether it's plant or animal, is composed of cells. Every single cell has it, asher zar'obo. Every single cell has that seed within itself that allows itself to self-replicate itself. Every cell of every life form. So there's 6 trillion cells, and inside those 6 trillion cells is a DNA molecule. Now these DNA molecules within the human body, let's see who knows. The DNA molecule within the human body. Like say the DNA within the heart cell, there's a DNA within the neurons, the nervous system, there's a DNA within the brain cells, there's a DNA in different types of cells in the body. They're all 100% identical. They're all identical. Now you say, how can that be? So if I have this DNA cell in the neuron, and it's telling the cells within the nervous system, create a neuron. A neuron is completely different than, for example, the cells of the skin. And the cells of the skin are completely different than, for example, the cells of the heart. But I'm saying they're all identical. They all have the exact zar'obo. What does zar'obo mean? It has a single seed. Zar'o is lashon yachid. So it's telling you all the cells are the same. All the DNAs, all the seeds within the cells, every single one is identical. How can that be? This is called expression of genes. So the DNA molecule is a huge molecule. Huge. You can't see it with the naked eye, obviously. Huge in comparison to microscopic life forms, right? Of course, the cell has within it the nucleus. You can't see the cell with the naked eye. You all understand that. It's incredibly small. Within the nucleus, you have the DNA molecule. Okay. And the answer is that when God created these cells, and he placed in them the nucleus, and he placed inside the nucleus the DNA molecules, somehow the cell understands which part of the DNA molecule, which gene, because there's different genes in every DNA molecule, which gene to express. So somehow the cells in the nervous system understand, hey, we're in the nervous system, let's express the parts of the DNA molecule that makes us into neurons. And then the cells in the heart muscles, they say, wait, we are now in the heart, let's express the part of the cell, the part of the gene, the part of the DNA molecule, that gene, which makes us into heart muscles, okay? By the way, if you seriously believe that this just all came about by, by coincidence, that somehow this incredible, unbelievable machine just somehow self-created itself. There's a bridge not too far away from me. Afterwards, I just want to discuss with you the sale of the bridge. Great bargain, $100, the bridge is yours. So this is the incredible creation that the Torah is looking at and the Torah is excited about. And I want to tell you another thing. because this is important. Let's take this DNA, because I want you to appreciate when it says Asher Zar'obo, again, a single seed. That seed is what? DNA molecule. So that single seed, just so you understand, if you were to take all the DNA molecules within the human body and lie them side by side, now obviously they're microscopic, but you unravel them and you lie them side by side, how far do you think they would reach? Again, you have 6 trillion cells. Each cell has a nucleus. Within each nucleus, you have a DNA molecule. These are super teeny, microscopic molecules. If you lie them side by side, you take all the DNA strands in the body, you unravel them, and you lie them side by side. How far do you think they would reach? Like, you get me a cup of water, please. Any guesses? A mile? 100 miles? 1,000 miles? To the moon and back, to the moon and back 600 times. Okay, thank you. To the moon and back 600 times. That's crazy stuff. So again, like this creation on the third day is incredible. It's an incredible thing. People don't appreciate it. I just want to spend another minute or two on it, because I personally am excited when I talk about this, because I marvel at God's creations personally. I'm amazed at this. Let's look at the human DNA molecule. How many letters do you have in it? 6 billion letters, an entire encyclopedia. And within this one molecule, which appears within every one of the 6 trillion cells, you have the equivalent of 20,000 different instruction manuals. For example, you have an instruction manual how to build the brain. You have an instruction manual how to create the lungs. You have an instruction manual how the stomach is supposed to be. It's all there, okay? So if you're looking at the plants, you could have an instruction manual how to create the leaves, and how the leaves are going to have the power to take the light and transform light from the sun into energy from the plant. It's incredible. It's just incredible. So this is the excitement of the Torah. I wanted to share that excitement with you because I want you to feel the awesomeness of what is happening here. And now you would understand also why this day has Vayad Elohim Kitov twice. It's the only day in creation that says Kitov twice, no other day. Because what's happening on this day is just, you just have to read it and think about it, and you get blown away. Okay. That's what I wanted to say about the genetic code, and now I'm going to say Beracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekol ha'am bara. Okay.
I like the stressing of it. It's Tov or
Kitov, Kitov. Vayal Elohim Kitov, Vayal Elohim Kitov. And it's talking about, again, Zar'obo twice. It's talking about the genetic, the DNA molecule. That's what it is.
I like that.
And that's why it's 1 zera. Why 1 zera? Because you can have 1 trillion cells. You can have 6 trillion cells. I don't know how many cells a lion has. Maybe an elephant has more. I don't know. But it's zera. It's the same identical molecule. That's the incredible thing about the Torah, that it recognized that within every one of these biological life forms, there is a zera. Okay, now I want to look at the pasuk again. It says, Tache ha'aretz. Literally, and the way I explained it, let the earth vegetate itself. What does it mean, let the earth vegetate? So you know the earth is inanimate at this point. If you go to the planet Mars, everything is dead. You go to any of the planets, so far we've sent spacecrafts to the moon, we went to Mars. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we recently, or not recently, actually a very long time ago, we went to Venus. So we've seen these desolate landscapes. So all over the universe, at least from what we've seen, and maybe we didn't see a lot of the universe, but apparently everything looks like it's desolate. Everything looks like it's dead. So Tacheh literally means let the earth turn into, from dead matter, let it produce living matter, right? That's what Tacheh means. It's a transformation. So this transformation can only be done by God. And the reason it can only be done by God, and you needed the intervention, that's why Vayomer Elohim is of the essence. You need God to create this, right? But later on, if you look at the continuation, so first it says Vayomer Elohim Tacheh ha'aretz, And then later on it says, "Vatoseh ha'aretz desha." It says, and the earth began to bring forth the grass and the vegetation. So again, when Hashem speaks to the earth, it says, "Vayomer Elohim tadsheh ha'aretz." But when it actually happens, it says, "Vatoseh ha'aretz." It just came out. What's the difference between tadsheh ha'aretz? Tadsheh means literally let it vegetate, let it turn into vegetables, or let it turn into plant life forms. And vatoseh ha'aretz means the land let forth the vegetables. Why does it switch? Right? It's important because every word here is, as you know, meaningful. Any ideas? Okay. So you know the famous question, when we're young, we always think about what came first, the chicken or the egg. And the Torah is clear. What came first is the plants. The plants came before the seeds. It says so explicitly. Tadsheh ha'aretz desha. Let there be these vegetation. And then eventually more sophisticated life forms, the trees with the fruits on it. So what came first? Clearly, the plants. What's incredible about this system is, it's true that you need God to transform this dead, inanimate, desolate landscape. You need God to transform it into animate, into living, biological life form. But once God does it, once tadsheh ha'aretz, once God says, let it become alive with plants, let it turn into plants, once he does it, vatoseh ha'aretz, it happens automatically. You don't need God to do it, meaning this miracle is a double miracle. The double miracle is that God not only transformed the desolate land into lush, beautiful plants, but these plants now had the ability to self-replicate and to ensure that the entire world is filled with those, and you don't need God anymore. You don't need God, meaning, well, I say you don't need God, or at least God hides himself. Of course, you always need God, but when we look at the plants, everything is here, that's it. So you have the seeds come out, they reach the soil, and the plants transform the desolate landscape into lush landscape. And one of the things that they think about, they say, oh, they want to, I don't get excited by this, but I'm bringing it because of the class, so don't get me wrong. But I know they always talk about one day we want to start a human settlement in Mars. That's a thing now. Okay, again, I'm not into that at all. That's just me. Maybe people get excited by that. I don't. I think the Earth is fine, but that's just me. Send me to a nice Caribbean island and good book, Torah book, I'll be happy. But anyway, people want to go to Mars. Let them go to Mars. That's okay. But one of the challenges is how do you live there? And one of the ideas is, well, we have to bring plants, and we have to somehow plant, seeds in the soil. And the question is, well, how do you do that? Because the soil doesn't have the qualities that allow a plant to live. But once we can overcome that trick, that first step, once we can figure out how to plant, potatoes in Mars, for example, potatoes is the thing you want to eat, right? So you want potatoes or corn. If you figure out how to do it, then the potatoes themselves, the plants themselves will transform the soil and turn the soil into something that is richer and that allows for other life forms or other plants to be planted. You understand? So that's the incredible thing about this creation. The plants are something that literally not only are created, but they transform the very earth that they're created on. And that's the difference between tadsheh ha'aretz, which is when God does it, it's a miracle. Toseh ha'aretz, let the land just let out that's it comes automatically. So I wanted to share that idea with you. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? The Torah is clear. First Hashem creates the plants, then Hashem creates the seeds that come from the plant. And you know what? Interesting, I did a little research on this. I was curious to see what the scientists say about this, and indeed they agree. Science agrees that plants came first. They have this, they try to explain somehow through the theory of evolution. Again, I don't find it to be particularly, when I hear people talk about the theory of evolution and these things happening spontaneously, I personally am not, I'm not intellectually thrilled by that type of thinking. I actually find it to be intellectually unimpressive on the part of the people that try to offer these evolutionary explanations. But nevertheless, I want to read to you what they say. So give me a moment. I'm going to open it up. And here it is. This is from a scientific journal. I want to hear it with your own ears. The earliest fossils of complex land plants date from around 470 million years ago. I guess there's a disagreement between this journal and the other one. The other one said 500 million. This says 470. Don't know what to do with that. Nevertheless, they resembled live warts, a kind of simple moss, and reproduce by releasing spores which are carried away when it rained. And they say, so these extra features took another 150 million years to evolve, whereupon the first seed-bearing plants emerged. So, says the scientific journal, plants came first by a long way. Right there. What does the Torah say? Plants came first. What do we know from scientific discovery? Plants came first. Again, remarkable how we see these connections between science and the Torah. Again, humanity can use God gave us a brain. The brain itself was incredible. Using the brain, we can decode the secrets of the world and see, oh wow, what a coincidence, just like the Torah says. So here it is again. Let's continue. We said why it says kitov twice. So let me just finish reading the Pesukim. Dasha, the land began to bring out these plant life forms. The vegetables. This is the end of the third day in creation. And again, as I told you, it's not days, it's not 24-hour days. These are different stages in the creation, right? So for example, the first day was like, in my opinion, a trillionth of a second, or whatever that number, that crazy small number was. That was the Big Bang. The second day was whatever it was. The third day is whatever it was. And now we are going to read the fourth day of creation. And I want to ask a question before we begin to the fourth day of creation. The fourth day of creation has to do with the creation of the sun and the moon and the different stars that we see in the heavens. What is missing from the third day of creation? There's something wrong here. Who knows? Okay. What is created in the fourth day? The sun. What was created in the third day?
Plants.
The plants.
Plants need sun.
Oh, okay. The plants need sun. Photosynthesis happens. Plants need they need that mechanism to absorb the energy and to transform it into food. So how can there be plants with no sun? If there's no sun, there's no plants. So I want to make this point clear. The fourth day is not about the creation of the sun and the creation of the moon. It never says Vayivra Elohim et hameorot. It doesn't say it. But rather it has to do with the placement of the sun and the placement of the moon and the placement of the various planets in a very precise manner. It's not talking about the creation. It never says Vayivra Elohim et hameorot. It says, for example, later on it says Vayivra Elohim et hatanim hagedolim. God created a huge ocean, the whales in the ocean. It says many times Vayivra. Here it doesn't say Vayivra, because this is not when they were created. Right? The Torah is very careful. This is about the placement, and we'll see why the placement of the sun and the placement of the earth and the moon is so important. But I just wanted to address that issue because it is a question that comes up a lot. So here we are on the fourth night of Hanukkah, and it is the fourth day of creation. And on the fourth day of creation, we're going to be reading about the luminaries. So Vayomer Elohim Yehi Me'orot Birkia Hashamayim. And God said, let there be luminaries within the rakia of the heavens. And I'm going to explain every word, as you know, but first let's just go over it once, and then we'll go back. Lehavdil ben yom u'ben halayla. And the purpose, or one of the purposes, one of the primary purposes, is in order to separate the night from the day. Separate the night from the day. Okay, let's continue. V'hayu le'otot u'lmo'adim. There will be signs. Otot literally means, where do we see the word ot in the Torah? What does the word ot mean? Who knows? Ot means letter. But also, what else does it mean? Signs. So for example, in Egypt, we have the 10 plagues. What do the 10 plagues refer to? Otot, miracles. Right? Lechol ha'otot ve'hamofetim. So the miracles in Egypt are referred to as otot. That's weird. So how does you explain? I got to tell you, that's not easy, by the way. The sun is an ot? Like, how is it a sign? I mean, astrology? No. Okay, let's continue though. I'll explain that. Wal mu'adim. Mu'adim means there will be different seasons. Wal yamim, the days. Veshanim, there will be years. Continuing in the verse, Vayulim orot birki hashamayim la'il al-aras, and then one of the primary roles of these luminaries, other than what we just said, we said otot, signs, or miracles. We said for seasons, we said for days, we said for years, but also these luminaries will shine light upon the earth. And so it was. God places or makes, it doesn't say vayivra, vayas, right? He completes the creation of these two large luminaries. Et ha'ma'or gadol, the largest, which is of course the sun. I will explain that soon. Lememshelet hayom, it's going to govern the day. What does it mean to govern? How does the sun govern? These are all important questions, right? So just think about it. We'll get to it. Et ha'ma'or katon lememshelet halayla, the small luminary, which is the moon, that's going to govern the night. Again, how does it govern? What does that mean? It's a strange. And then there's going to be the stars. And then Hashem places them very carefully. God saw that this was all beneficial. And this is the third day. This third day is difficult. It's difficult. I had to think about it a lot. I read different explanations. Some of them were more satisfying than others. I just want to take it step by step. So let's start with the first pasuk, Vayomer Elohim. So this is going to be something, and I explained to you before that when it says Vayomer Elohim, the word Elohim has to do with nature. So this is something that's going to manifest itself in the natural world. Okay. Now, he doesn't say Yehi Me'orot. He doesn't just, I want to create the luminaries, or he says, Yehi me'orot birki hashamayim. It shouldn't say I'm going to put the me'orot in the shamayim. I'm going to put them, shamayim means heaven. He said I'm going to put it in the rakia of the shamayim. The rakia is like literally the space, right? So we said there's space. So the space of the heavens. What does it say rakia hashamayim? Just say shamayim. What is rakia? So I'm going to do if it's okay, like a mind experiment. Let's think about this. What is space? You look outside, you see the blackness in the sky, and within the blackness you see stars, right? But then you see empty space. So what is it? Is space something? Or is it just, maybe space is just an empty vacuum? Or is it an actual thing, right? So think of the world. Okay, so think of the world we live in. So we're in this room. Imagine all the chairs disappeared, all the bookshelves disappeared. Imagine the entire building disappeared. Outside there's tons of buildings. Imagine all the buildings are gone, the cars are gone, and you're there alone. And then imagine the earth disappears, and then everything around you, the stars, what is left? What is left is empty space. Imagine all the dust all the stars in the galaxy, all the dust, all the microscopic and atomic particles, everything gone. So what are you left with? You're left with nothingness. There's nothing left. That's incorrect. Space, empty space, is not nothing. Empty space is something. Space, for example, has a curvature. It can bend. There are ripples in space that travel like the waves of the ocean. Space is real. It's a mystery. Scientists are bewildered by what exactly space is. And one of the things that Albert Einstein did, he thought very deeply about what space is. And he described space. He described space in the general theory of relativity. and a series of very complex mathematical equations that he wrote down. And these mathematical equations describe the space-time matrix. But the point of Albert Einstein was not just to describe space, but to say space is real, it's something. So when you talk about putting the celestial objects, the sun, the moon, you're not just putting it in an empty vacuum. You're putting it in the rakia. The rakia is space, literally what God stretches. Rakia, roka means to stretch, and we know that space is constantly being stretched, right? That we know. And so that's why it's called rakia. So space is being stretched because the universe is expanding, right? And that's why the Torah refers to it as that which is stretched. And he says, put the sun in that space. Absolutely accurate from the perspective of physics and from the perspective of general theory of relativity. That is a perfect way of describing placing the sun in the space-time matrix. It has a very specific location, so the Torah recognizes that space is not nothing, space is something. Number one. Number two. There are two things. We have Or. Or was created on the first day. Or means light. And we have Ma'or. Ma'or means a luminary, right? Or Me'orot. Me'orot means the plural of luminaries. Now there are two types of Me'orot. One type of luminary is a luminary that generates its own light. For example, the sun. Another type of luminary is a luminary that doesn't generate its own light, but it reflects light from something else. For example, the moon. Now look what it says. It says, Yehi me'orot birki hashamayim. There's a mistake there. There's a grammatical mistake. So it appears. It says, Yehi me'orot birki hashamayim. Okay. The word me'orot, is it plural or singular? Plural. Me'orot. If it was singular, what would you say? Ma'or. Okay. The word Yehi, is it plural or singular? Singular. So the pasuk should have said, Yihiyu me'orot birki hashamayim. Doesn't say that. Why not? It looks like a grammatical error, and of course there is no grammatical error in the Torah. We have two luminaries. We have the sun, because from these two luminaries, only one actually produces light. Yehi, the sun, me'orot. So the light of the sun creates two luminaries. You see the subtlety of the pasuk? It started as Yehi, one, but it becomes Me'orot, two, right? Because again, as you know, the moon, we see from the earth, we see the moon lighting. And it's, there's light in the moon, it's lighting. And this is what the ancients thought. So the ancients would look at the moon, they would look at the sun, but we understood that no, the light from the moon is a reflection of the light from the sun. So it's Yehi from the sun, Me'orot, it becomes two. You understand the depth of the pasuk? Okay, and that's why if you look at the word me'orot, it's missing the vav. Me'orot is spelled mem aleph resh tav. Where's the vav? Is to indicate the singular form. To indicate we read it plural, but it's really one. You understand the idea? So this is fascinating. So that's number one. What is the purpose of these me'orot? We said number one, to separate night from day. So what produces the night and day? So we have the sun and we have the earth, and the earth, it's Hanukkah, so I guess the earth spins like a dreidel, or to use scientific terminology, the earth rotates around its axis, right? So that produces the light or day, right? So there's a spin of the earth. Right? Now the scientists don't exactly understand what caused the original spin of the earth. There's different theories. They don't really understand what it is. But we know that the earth spins. And because the sun is always there, so the sun is always there and the earth is spinning, and when it's facing the sun, obviously it's daytime, and on the other side of the earth it's night, and then as it continues to spin, the other way around. So that's the simplest part. Lehavdil ben Yom ben Alana is really the easiest part of the pasuk. But then it says there will be otot. So some people like to say otot here, well, that refers to astrology. It's saying that, there's astrological significance to the sun. There is astrological significance to the moon, right? But we know that this can't be the case because the Harambam says that astrology is of no significance, that it's just not true. And the Navi Yirmiyah says, and I'm going to read to you the pasuk, Ume'otot hashamayim al tehatu. Do not give credence to the signs, the astrological signs in the sky. So what does it mean here when it says otot? Okay, so I want to put that on the side for a moment. I want to skip over it, but I'm letting you know that's a problem. What does it mean that the sun and the moon will be a type of omen, a type of miracle? What is it? Okay, put that on the side. I want to continue the pasuk. Wal mu'adim. What does mu'adim mean? The seasons. Okay. So now, what causes the seasons? Who knows? So let me ask you just a question, just to get like a general, like kind of first, second, third class type of astronomy. So summer is when the Earth is closest to the sun, or when the Earth is farthest from the sun. What do you think? Closest, right? And winter is when the Earth is closest to the sun or furthest from the sun, right? And that's a natural reaction that everybody gives me when I ask this question. The only problem is that when it's winter here, it's summer in the southern hemisphere, and when it's summer here, it's winter in the southern hemisphere. So we're either close or we're far. We can't be both, right? So something's wrong with that theory. So that was mean. I know. Anyway, what causes the seasons, it's actually, just to answer the question, it happens to be that here in the northern hemisphere, when it's winter, we're actually closer to the sun. And summer in the northern hemisphere, we're actually farther from the sun. So just whatever. So that's how it causes the seasons. So the pasuk is saying that these me'orot will cause the seasons. Again, I'm going to read it. It says, V'hayu le'otot, because of these me'orot, we'll have the signs, ul mu'adim, and we'll have the seasons. So I can understand how the sun is related to the weather on Earth. Well, obviously, the sun generates, the light and the heat and the energy from the sun reaches Earth, and that's why we have weather here. But what does the moon have to do with it? So I just want to explain this to you because it's really important, because this is like really precise. So the Earth, when it spins like a dreidel, so usually when you spin a dreidel, you try to get it to stay straight, because the straighter it is, the longer it'll spin, right? I do not play dreidels, by the way. Just want to put that on the table right there. Okay. Now, but when the Earth spins, it's actually tilted. It's tilted. So there's a 23-degree tilt of the Earth off the straight line, perpendicular. So it's 23 degrees tilted. So now imagine the Earth spinning like a dreidel, right? And it's going around, and now let's say the sun is here. Let's say this is the sun. So when the Earth is tilted like this towards the sun, the northern hemisphere is going to be experiencing summer, because the angle of the light, of the energy coming from the sun is a direct angle, and therefore it's much hotter. And then when the Earth continues, reaches this part, right? Now this is the sun. Now, right, Earth is still at that 23-degree angle. Now it's winter in the northern hemisphere. What stabilizes that particular 23-degree angle? What is it? Because the Earth should be kind of like, it's when you spin a dreidel and it kind of loses its centrifugal force and it kind of like starts wobbling. Why doesn't the Earth wobble? That's the question I'm asking. It should wobble. Otherwise, if the Earth wobbled, we'd all be in really big trouble. It'd be like no set season. It'd be like really messed up. Those apocalyptic movies, they say. I remember when I was years ago, Al Gore used to speak about global warming and say, 2012 there's going to be an apocalypse, and they even had a movie called 2012. I don't know if you remember that. Anyway, there's going to be really, big stuff happening. None of it happened. So I don't know what to say about that. But the question is, why is the Earth not wobbling? You know what I'm saying? It should be wobbling like a dreidel. And the answer is because of the moon. The moon actually stabilizes the Earth and gives it a very stable position in its axis. And if it wasn't for that, we'd be in big trouble. So when the Torah says it's not just the sun, but it's a combination of the sun, because the sun gives the energy, and the moon stabilizes the axis, that's why you have seasons. That's the Moadim, right there. Okay, that's great.
Gravity also is part of that?
I mean, because it's the gravity of the moon that stabilizes the Earth's particular 23-degree tilt off its axis. The axis is tilted 23 degrees off the perpendicular. Right? So it could have been like this, it could have been like this. Uranus, for example, actually is like this. Just as an example, it actually spins, it's weird, which I guess means probably it's summer all the time in one place and winter all the time in the other, I don't know. Right, but Earth is very unique, so that's number one. What else was there? So we said there was the Moadim, that's the seasons. There's the Yamim, that's the days. And of course there's the Shanim. The Shanim is the easiest part. What is the Shanim? The what we call the year, 365 and a quarter days, is the amount it takes the Earth to orbit around the sun. So let's say here's the sun, here's the Earth, it goes from here back and it reaches the same spot exactly 365.25 days. It's not exactly, I mean it's approximate. Okay, so that's the seasons, that's the calendars. Let's continue reading because I still have to explain to you what otot are. And I just want to read to you what scientifically the sun determines the orbit of the Earth and the length of the solar year. Just like the Pasuk says. This is revolutionary because, well, you know, they didn't even realize back then that the Earth was orbiting around the sun. They thought that the Earth was in the center and everything is going around the Earth, right? The moon, I told you how it affects the seasons. And finally, one last point before we get to what otot is. The Pasuk says, Vayiten. What does Vayiten mean? Vayiten otam Elohim birkia hashamayim. What does Vayiten mean? He placed them. But it means he placed them with precision. It doesn't say Vayasem. Vayasem means just to place something. Vayiten means very precise, very calculated. So what I want to tell you is that the position of the sun, the earth, the moon, the other planets, everything is perfectly placed to allow for life to develop on earth and for life not just to develop on earth, but to thrive on earth. If there was one thing slightly off, we'd be in big trouble. I just want to give you a single example. Okay, I want to give you one simple example, and it's as follows. So every 405,000 years, the Earth, Venus, and Jupiter, so you have the sun over here, then you have Venus, which is the second planet from the sun, right? Then you have the Earth, which is the third planet from the sun, and then you have Jupiter, which is the fifth planet from the sun, okay? Right, okay, because in between you have Mars. So the point is, every 405,000 years, they line up perfectly. Okay. That affects the weather on Earth. That creates a certain climactic climate. It creates a certain climactic cycle which takes place over the course of 405,000 years. If this alignment was off slightly, we would have a different type of cycle on Earth, right? So everything, I'm just giving you one simple example of the placement of the planets, the placement of the sun relative to the Earth, the size of the Earth, the size of the moon, everything is perfect. And if anything was slightly off, the whole system would collapse. And one of the things that the scientists are amazed at is why it's so perfect. And they give all types of answers to that. But when they look for planets that might have life on them, according to their theory, they always try to look for planets that are exactly like the Earth, that have the same situation, and it's very rare to find those types of planets. It's very rare to find those types of planets. Okay, so the point of the Torah is that when God created the different luminaries, he was very precise and very particular, and he had a plan. It's 9:30, I'm going to stop here. I owe you the answer to otot. What are otot? We will study that next week. Any questions?